Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Janka Koen and I am here with Sonal Patil. And today we are talking about nurturing teams through digital leadership. But first, let's talk about a little bit ourselves. Sonal, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Sonal, and I'm a principal program manager in Microsoft in the commercial software engineering, also known as CSC group. As a TPM in CSC, I work with my team of awesome engineers, and we work with our customer, provide to them technical architecture, project leadership, but most of all, write great code alongside their engineers. I've been in the software industry for about 18 years, 10 of which I've worked remotely. And I've led teams in the UK, in the US, in Europe, in India, and I've lived in 3 countries at the time. So I think of myself as a remote working veteran. I'm not a veteran at Microsoft, though. I've been here for a few months and I'm loving the culture here. Diversity and inclusion are buzzwords, everywhere right now. But in Microsoft and in CSC, I feel like these are not some things you just see in a training or it's plastered on the wall. People really live by those words, and I'm really loving it. Of course, speaking of colleagues, I've got my great colleague here, Janka, who does some fantastic work in CSE. Janka, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in CSE?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sonal. I guess if there is absolutely one single thing that I would like you to remember about myself is that I have the best job on the entire planet. The title behind this type of a job is called Senior Human Experience Designer. And I can already see some eyebrows being raised and it's like thinking, Senior Human Experience Designer? What is that? We kind of like to think about it as user experience 2.0. There's this joke that goes, there are only two groups in a world that are referring to people as users, and those are software engineers and drug dealers. So we really would like to take it to the next step and really make sure that we are referring to the entire spectrum of people around the
Mhm.
world.
Mhm.
So if there is absolutely like my kind of best dreams, then there is a second thing that you can remember about myself is a fun fact is that I was born in a country that does not exist today. And the name of the country is Czechoslovakia. Throughout my life, I used to live in Slovakia, in Austria, where I live right now, in Germany, United States. So truly kind of really a multinational background, and I absolutely love and thrive in working in this kind of an environment. Perhaps just about myself, I have been working in Microsoft for the past 8 years. And again, working and doing this with you, Sonal, and being able to compare our notes of being somebody at 8 years and somebody 8 months at Microsoft is truly exciting.
Oh, your job sounds so fascinating, Yanka. But both of us mentioned CSC. Can you let our audience know a little bit about what CSC is and what we do?
Yeah, absolutely. So CSC is kind of like a unicorn organization in
Mhm.
Microsoft, and it stands for Commercial Software Engineering. What it is that we are about 800 really excited people that are passionate about technology, and we work with top 100 customers around the world. What we do is that imagine you're a customer and you really have a challenge that you're unable to solve. Well, we are kind of your answer because what we do is that we team up with you and we solve your most challenging technical problems using Microsoft Cloud. Once we've solved it, we kind of see the potential. Hey, are others interested in the same thing? If yes, we are kind of either open source it or make it part of our product. So it's really, really is truly exciting what we do. Perhaps just something into a perspective, since we are talking about diverse group and also engineering that is completely around the world. We are 800 people working at CSC. We work in 42 countries around the world. We, at least last year, we have clocked in more than 100,000 dev days altogether. So it's truly is absolutely remarkable in a way how we are able to kind of stress test everything that we are doing in terms of remote work and in terms of virtual meetings now that the pandemic is kind of in its full swing. So throughout this, we have had a lot of lessons learned. And so perhaps the first thing that absolutely comes to my mind when it comes to how do you nurture your team in the times of digital leadership is absolutely through your people. So I would really wonder, Sonal, what are some of your experiences in terms of some of the observations that you have had, and what is it that we can do better?
Yeah. So, in my opinion, being leading remote teams for a while, I think by nature most remote teams are diverse, but it's very important to have inclusion at the heart of that team. And something that sometimes creeps in is what we call unconscious bias. We all know what unconscious bias is, but I had a practical, an example, an experience of this firsthand. I was leading this team, which were two groups of people in two different countries, in Europe and in India. And over time, I noticed that one group of people had, some preconceived notions or prejudices about the quality of work from the other group of people. And it took some time for me to understand that because I was remote, and those group of people met locally all the time, and those kind of ideas got amplified because of the non-diverse nature of that group and meeting locally. But it took some time for me to realize that's happening. But when I did realize that's happening, I realized that it had to be addressed because this can cause really a lot of friction among the team. And the way I addressed that was firstly was to break that diversity, right? Break that uniformity. So I became their kind of non-diverse person. I visited their site where often tried to gain their trust and get make these relationships with those people, direct relationships, help them break those assumptions, those presumptions. And secondly, I try to be more one-on-one with people, like break out of the group mold, have one-on-one meetings with them, or have them have one-on-one meetings with the other group. So I think when you put two different diverse people in a one-on-one situation and try to keep it intentionally social, again, those barriers break and those presumptions break. And we do that in CSE as well. We've got these things called 9 cups of coffee or a dev rendezvous where we intentionally pair people from different groups and different countries for say half an hour talking about things that they do outside of work. And I think that works wonderfully because it brings us together. Even though we're so global, it brings us together as one team.
Absolutely. That's a great observation. Perhaps from my perspective, just to build upon, making sure that you break up the diversity or kind of really schedule as many often these one-on-ones is a topic of how do you actually even recognize it. For me, it absolutely kind of listening in for things such as, for example, giving a feedback that sounds more subjective than an
Mhm.
objective one, and those are kind of at least the red flags that I would definitely try to look into. And so the ways how what Sonal have described, having these rendezvous crews or 9 cups of coffee and really making sure that people are mixing with one another is an absolutely a great way to at least get started in uncovering of unconscious bias.
Yeah, yeah. And we touched upon the topic of trust and how to build trust within our teams. And I know, Yanka, you get inserted almost into different teams every time as a HX engineer. How do you lead? How do you influence these teams? And how do you kind of lead your thought into these teams?
That's a really good question. For me, when you are working with somebody on a group, it's sometimes it's just so hard because there are, as I said before, we put together these crews, and the way how we operate with our customers is that we are always making sure that the perfect team is put together. May it be somebody like me, a designer, somebody like you, from a PM perspective. Then we have somebody who is an engineer or a machine learning person. And what is really interesting is that none of us are in a management type of an employee relationship, which means when we are leading our own streams, it many times really comes to absolutely just trust and basically leading by influence versus actually going in through authority. So for me, there are a couple of things that we are doing in Microsoft, especially in CSC, in a way how we are really making sure that people have the tools to be able to recognize and really learn from one another. One thing that I want to kind of show you over here, since I'm a designer, it wouldn't be a good thing if I haven't shown you a diagram, is actually this thing. It's a Venn diagram, but we are talking about 3 ways how you can really look into a situation when you are trying to lead, as I said, with influence over an impact. The first thing right here at the top is called key individual accomplishments. This is kind of the first thing that you're thinking about. Yes, I am doing my job. These are the things that I'm doing in order to be successful. These are some of my commitments. I guess we all get it. However, the second two things are the ones that are really, really interesting, and specifically the one that is built on the success of others. So when you're leading, and it's not, as I said, specifically a situation where you're a manager, it really is important to recognize what is the motivation of the people that you're working with. What are their goals? And perhaps what are literally these overlaps of what are you trying to achieve? What are their goals? Once you have found that piece of thing, that's the moment when you start to really uplift everybody else. How are you making sure that they are successful? How are you empowering them to do the best job that they can? Once you're thinking of that, you're on a great path. However, the third thing that really is putting everything together is that what are some of the results that are built on the ideas and work of others? And this is really special because you are, even when you're doing a fantastic job and even when you're recognizing the amazing work that others are doing, if you're always just creating a new thing and are not looking left and right and kind of reusing what the others have doing, then perhaps you're also not gaining their trust. So kind of really just to summarize, number one, of course, don't forget about your own key individual accomplishments, but then make sure you are addressing the success of others, making sure you give kudos, making sure that you are giving them all the praise that they deserve. However, again, we are all in all of this together. So make sure you're building everything that you do on the ideas of others.
I must add to that, in my experience so far in CSC, whenever one person is built on the ideas of someone else, they always make a point to give a shout out back to the person whose ideas they've built on. And I find that really cool about working here.
I'm really glad that you were able to observe that already. That makes me really happy, Sonal.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I guess one last thing, and the third thing we would like to talk about is the overall wellness being of your team. When you talk about a nurture, it's one thing to talk about the unconscious bias. It's another thing to talking about leading by influence versus rather than the authority. But really, what about the well-being and really kind of the mental health of your people? I'm pretty sure, Sonal, you have some of really good ideas and examples that we could give as a tips to our
Sure.
audience.
Yeah, I mean, well-being is of utmost importance. In fact, our team just had a session, training on well-being. And some of the ideas they give should be fairly obvious to us, but we are so caught up in this scenario right now where our days turn into nights and our offices turn into homes and back into offices that we kind of tend to forget these things. But there are three different levels of well-being practices that you can do. So the first one's called like 30-second breaks. So you take a deep breath, take a break, 30 seconds, take a deep breath, stand up, or do this 20-20-20 trick where after 20 minutes of work you're looking 20 feet away for 20 seconds. The second bunch of tricks are like 5-minute tricks, so something that you do for 5 minutes. So like get creative, doodle something for 5 minutes, or play Tetris. Apparently this it's been scientifically proven that playing Tetris switches the channels in your brains. So yeah, that is like a short 5-minute trick. And then long term, like do your exercise, sleep well, drink plenty of water, participate in fun and games. Again, all very obvious things, but some things that we don't seem to practice, or we seem to forget in the stress of it all. And not just for ourselves, it's something that we want to remind our teammates to do as well, to carry this forward, to make sure you're really contributing or really coming together as an effective team.
Yeah, that is so important. I mean, I personally literally went through a situation where I found it just so helpful, a teammate reaching out to myself. So, specifically, I hope that I was not alone. What I was going through at the beginning of the whole pandemic is that I really had a big dip in my motivation. There were just so many things going on. I had my brother, he is living in another country. My parents are in another country. Basically, just so many things were happening at the same time. I found it's incredibly hard to focus on my work. And at some point, I felt like, I feel like it might be really kind of getting in the way of kind of me showing my results. And it was really interesting because I literally ended up having a conversation with one of my colleagues on my team, and we really came through. I was, number one, I was really worried. I was like, oh God, it's just a moment of vulnerability. Isn't it something that is going to, in the end, kind of be against me, but you're literally not kind of feeling it. You want to do your work. But the moment I shared with one of my colleagues, and in the moment that we kind of opened up to one another, and even my manager, we really found out it was just not me. It was everybody in an exact same situation. Everybody was struggling with the same thing. We were really lucky that we were able to check on one another and making sure that we are not only taking care of our own well-being, as you said, by sleeping, by eating well, by exercising, but also making sure that the others are also having a good time. And if not, give them and make sure that they are not feeling left alone, because that's literally the situation. And in the end, number two, the world will not stop spinning. It's like whether you take vacation or not, whether you feel that your motivation will go back up when you are able. Of course, we are aware it's not always possible. When you're able, the world will not stop spinning and the project will just keep continuing. Trust me. And number three, it's absolutely okay to ask for help, right? As I said, many times you will actually find out that there are so many others that are in the same situation. And by showing your vulnerability and opening up the topic, you will probably empower the others to share the same and learn from one another.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I hope that if you're having any challenges in managing a remote team, our tips and experiences about recognizing unconscious bias or leading through influence rather than authority would have resonated with you. And I hope we've encouraged you to take wellness breaks, you and your team, and play Tetris. If you have any questions, we look forward to hearing from you and if you sharing your experiences and having a chat with you. Thank you very much.
Just realised I was muted, so sorry about that. A big thank you there to Janka and Sonal for that great chat, and also to Sonal for pointing out my mic was just muted. I do appreciate that. Janka, welcome back. We spoke a few weeks back. We had a great chat then. How are you doing? Good to have you back with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
And Sonal, welcome. Lovely to have you with us, a new face for the event. And it's great to hear about your story at Microsoft. So welcome to the conference, and hopefully we'll get some good questions in now.
Yeah, to be here, Chris. Thank you.
Sonal, you said you'd started with Microsoft in the last few months. So did you actually join during the pandemic?
No, luckily I did not. It was before the pandemic, but yeah, it has. I was like not a new joiner. I was in the team for a while, but most of my kind of new joining stuff was done before the pandemic, thankfully.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So we've got some questions in from the audience, which we'll look to get ticked off. A really good one that came in during the presentation was around kind of digital tools and technologies, and the question was: has digital raised more of a barrier or less of a barrier to collaboration within your team? So I think what we're getting at there is kind of probably prior to the pandemic, the digital tools that remove the need for more face to face. Obviously, with an international organisation like Microsoft, everyone's working within different teams within different countries, so the need for that technology is in place. But has digital, in your opinion, broken down some of the barriers, or indeed has it helped more?
I would say, at least in my perspective, it literally has put up all in the same boat. Before, I was covering 19 time zones around the world. Now I have an amazing colleague, Buana, out of Sydney, who kind of taking over the Asia. But even previously, it was just so hard. People were sitting, meeting, for example, somewhere in Singapore or somewhere in Osaka in Japan. And, kind of I was always kind of a little bit of the left out person, and always kind of trying to make everybody think of the way of, how everybody who is even participating in the digital world can have the full experience. And it was kind of really hard to build that empathy. And I have a feeling that now everybody being literally, as I said, in the same boat, and everybody experienced the same thing and understanding these challenges, I kind of have a feeling it made quite a few things a lot easier for us. So I would definitely say it actually in some ways have opened up doors, and I have a feeling people now, and not only now, but I do believe also in the future will have a lot more empathy when it comes to remote work and making sure that everybody is included and everybody can participate.
Yeah, nice.
Absolutely. I'll just add to that in my opinion, the way it's broken barriers is now we're literally in other people's homes, right? We're looking at cameras into their homes. So I think we're connecting with people more on a personal level. We're okay if a baby cries in the background or a dog barks, whereas previously it might have been considered unprofessional. We're kind of normalizing that now. And I think that is a great thing to break barriers.
No, that's a really good point. There was that infamous kind of viral video of the children breaking into the room on the newsroom. So yeah, and we've historically at our conferences run quite a lot of diversity and inclusion, like panel sessions where we've brought on various senior leaders and those working to improve diversity and inclusion within larger organisations. And one of the things we hear from a lot is that of kind of imposter syndrome. And obviously that's particularly, unfortunately, a case with a lot of kind of females in business that, are in senior positions or, within management positions. There's often that feeling of imposter syndrome caused by whatever culture might have been in place or is in place within that organisation. Have you had an experience or had a colleague or know someone that was kind of a victim of that imposter syndrome? And what would you advise, maybe, if so, on overcoming that and, particularly maybe bringing in male allies to make this a thing of the past? Hope that makes sense.
Sure, that's a great question. I would love to take that one. So we, as many orgs, we have reorgs occasionally in our organization. And when that happens, when you move to another role and maybe in another role which other people have been for a while, there is that problem that you might have that imposter syndrome there. So a couple of bits of advice that one of my managers gave me. First one is just know that you don't have to buy or don't have to make the place for yourself at the table. You are at the table. You are in that role. You are already at the table. Don't think that you have to prove yourself and find your place at the table. And the second thing is find allies, not just because sometimes we're scared about raising certain issues because we're not sure if it's an issue in the first place or not, right? You're kind of second doubting yourself, second guessing whether did that really happen? Were they really, saying those things to me? Find an ally who can just verify that, who you can just talk to, who's around you in your team, for example, who you can ask these questions. Did that really just happen or was it just me?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good answer.
For me, honestly, imposter syndrome, it's like, it's a part of the daily routine as much as I don't want it to be, but I have a feeling almost everybody has in some way experienced, this imposter syndrome. For me specifically, it's kind of even tougher because I actually I studied computer science. I really was on a path of being really an engineer and kind of really coding the entire day. And then already during my university, I kind of really quickly started to see kind of this emergence of, hey, actually, I really want to do the things that happened even before that. And I started shifting first to visual design and then really to the user experience. And so I do not actually have any formal education when it comes to design. And I have a feeling it kind of has been for quite some time at the beginning of my career, almost like hindering me to really be able, and as Sonal says, yes, you are sitting at the table, but I kind of felt like, well, what if somebody else is kind of like have a louder voice, or they have a official education that it comes from this field, and it really has led to a lot of self-doubt. And at least the way how I have dealt with it is not only about finding a mentor, like somebody who you can talk to or validate your points, but actually finding your sponsor. A sponsor is a person that 100% believes in you, somebody who really will kind of help you open the doors and really kind of make you kind of build that trust in yourself. And so now, of course, it comes and goes, right? There are some things that you deal with on, like, let's say a new technology or something that you really have not come across before. And again, these kind of thoughts starts emerging. But honestly, at this point, I have a feeling that, you know, you really have a voice. There's always something you can add. And you know what? There's always this thing that people say, hey, there are no such a thing as stupid questions. And I can 100% agree with that, because even when you're unsure, even when you, for example, are self-doubting yourself, alone that you're sitting there, alone that you are providing a different perspective and asking questions that people might have not even thought about before is already not only helping you yourself, but also everybody else who is participating within the conversation as well. So it's tough. We all go through this. And again, it's all about reaching out and talking to one another and finding out that you're really not alone in this.
Nice. Two really good answers there. Thank you. So you mentioned about prejudice within the presentation, and you mentioned kind of like the cultural thing with regards to prejudice. Are there other factors to prejudice? For example, seniority levels and things like that. Are there other kind of barriers that, you know, employees face within the workforce on that?
I think you just hit the nail on the head there. Right? Seniority level is probably another one that, you know, you very often I've heard this from my team members as well. A person who's not a senior or a principal have to prove their point. Have to work harder to make the point. Mm-hmm. And I think as leaders of these teams, it's our job to make sure that doesn't happen, right? Everybody who's at the table has got a voice at the table. So even if a junior person should feel empowered to put the hand up and say something, and maybe we should ask them for inputs as well, show them that conversation is open. Other forms of prejudice, you know, there's this thing called similarity bias. So usually people who are not similar to you, people tend to prejudice against them. So, you know, you could, there are many, many different things that you could, people are prejudiced against.
I do have an interesting anecdote about that. Actually, it was literally back at the days when I was starting to work in Microsoft, and just to kind of really draw the point, you know, that we do not kind of think in ways of hierarchies. There is no such a thing of like, yeah, you know, one person is junior and the other person is, let's say, principal level, that the principal level has let's say, a higher authority or kind of their voice is heard more. But the anecdote when I started working in Microsoft, I think literally it was my first week. And one thing that we have here, at least in Austria, but all around the other offices, is that there is open space. Like every day you come in and you choose your own desk. And I literally come into the office and I ask, hey, like, is there any dedicated space that I can take? And I was like, no, you know, just grab whatever you want. Mm-hmm. And literally me being like the junior of the juniors, you know, I found the perfect, you know, lighting, the best monitor, you know, the window and everything. And for about 2 weeks time, I literally have observed every morning my manager coming to the table, kind of with the sad eyes, you know, looking at the desk that I've chosen, and he just moved on. And after a while, I actually learned that it was his kind of table. You know, we are all humans of habits. And it was just kind of interesting because even though he kind of was definitely senior to me, definitely had a lot more authority, he never said anything. This is the way how it works. You know, it's not about, you know, somebody being more senior or having more authority. It literally is, we're all equal. And I'm absolutely love working for a company that treats us employees as really humans that are all equal to one another. So just a small thing on the side.
That's great. Well, thank you. That's all we've got time for. But thank you so much for both joining us. Janka, it's great to see you and have you with us again. And Sonal, it was great meeting you in this virtual capacity. So thanks again for your time and commitment on this. It was great to hear from you. As I mentioned last time, Janka, it's always great hearing about the cultural aspect of any kind of business transformation.